Okay, it's official. When you have a movie where a goanna is for some reason rapping a song out of nowhere, then you know that this isn't going to be a normal movie. Caution! The following video is an in-depth review of the movie I'm currently reviewing, which means that there will be massive spoilers in the review. If you haven't seen this movie yet, then please feel free to watch this movie first before watching this video. However, if you have already seen this movie, or you just want to know my thoughts on this movie, then keep watching. This movie was originally requested to me by New Way to Feel the Pain years ago, and this was one of the last movies that I had reviewed at the time before I decided to take my long break from reviewing movies and TV shows. So now, I'm back to reviewing movies, and I want to revisit this movie again to see if it still holds up for me. FernGully: The Last Rainforest was another one of those movies that was made during the time where environmental movies and TV shows were becoming the norm. Back then, we had TV shows like Captain Planet and the Planeteers, and movies like Once Upon a Forest, and to a lesser extent, Jetsons the Movie, that would constantly preach to the audience about the importance of taking care of the environment. FernGully: The Last Rainforest, however, was a unique case, as it was one of the few environmental movies that I had seen that actually involved fantasy elements like fairies living in the rainforest. Although, you could make the argument about Once Upon a Forest having fantasy elements also by having talking animals as the protagonists. I actually mentioned in my original review that I consider this film to be a fantasy film with environmental themes underneath the story. But before I go into more details with that statement, I would like to give out a brief summary of this film. The film starts off with a fairy girl named Krista who is very curious about the world outside of her home, FernGully. Even though she was forbidden to go outside of FernGully, Krista decides to go outside of FernGully anyway, and it was then that she saw some black smoke coming out from a distance. Krista then decided to tell Maggie, the sprite of the forest and Krista's mentor, about the black smoke that she saw. Maggie then starts telling Krista the story about how humans and fairies used to live in harmony with each other. But then one day an evil spirit called Hexes came by and nearly destroyed FernGully. It was then that the fairies had to band together to trap Hexes into a tree to prevent him from causing any more destruction. But then all the humans left FernGully, and the fairies believed that the humans had become extinct as a result. However, when a crazed fruit bat named Batty Coda comes into FernGully and tells the fairies about how humans had experimented on him, it was then that Krista became even more curious about humans and wanted to find them at Mount Warning. When Krista makes it to Mount Warning, she discovered that there were red X's marked on the trees, and she finds the construction crew cutting down the trees. Among the construction crew, Krista meets up with a young man named Zach, as she accidentally shrinks him to fairy size when she was trying to save him from a falling tree. Krista then promises that she'll find a way to unshrink Zach, but in the meantime, the two of them ended up having various adventures in the rainforest. During that time, Krista tries to teach Zach about the importance of the rainforest, while Zach starts developing feelings for her. Meanwhile, the construction workers accidentally freed Hexes from his prison, and Hexes then starts destroying FernGully using the construction workers' machinery. FernGully: The Last Rainforest was another one of those movies that was based off a book that I didn't even know existed. It was based off a book written by Diana Young of the same name. So, because I never read the book or even heard of it, I can't really make any comparisons between this movie and the source material. Too bad. I would have loved to see how this movie differs from the book. Anyway, this is probably one of the most unique environmental movies I have ever seen. It was one of the few environmental films that I have seen that actually put a lot of detail into the designs of the rainforest. Now, I was looking up on the internet to see if FernGully is a real place. Well, sort of. The designs of FernGully were actually based off the real rainforests in Australia, and the cartoonist spent a lot of time in the rainforest to accurately portray the rainforest for this film. That's what I love about the designs of the rainforest in this film. The fact that the cartoonist took the time to explore the rainforests in real life shows that they really cared about the accurate portrayals of the rainforest for the film. Heck, I didn't even know that rainforests existed in real life until I saw this film. Anyway, other than the fact that the film portrayed the appearance of the rainforest faithfully, I was also impressed with how it tackles environmental themes. I like the fact that the film never sugarcoated the truth about what would happen to a forest if you polluted it. The forest would start dying and its inhabitants would suffer for it, as it nearly happened to the fairies and the animals living in the rainforest. Even though the film shows that the human loggers were somewhat responsible for FernGully's near destruction because they accidentally released the evil being Hexes from his prison, the film never outright villainizes the humans for this act. In this case, the humans didn't know anything about FernGully or even anything about Hexes, and they were just doing their jobs. The humans are portrayed as being just misguided and a bit thoughtless about the whole situation, and honestly, you can't really blame them for not knowing any better for what was going on with FernGully. This is where the human versus nature theme of the film started to get a bit confusing, and I'll go more into that later. I also love the fact that at the end of the film, Zack tells his remaining co-workers that things have got to change. This shows that the humans are starting to understand about how important it is to take care of the rainforest and the environment in general after seeing the destruction that FernGully went through. I was actually surprised that there is no magical beings hating the humans type of story here. The fairies in this movie thought that all the humans were extinct, so they never really thought much about the humans. It wasn't until Zack came along that they found out that the humans existed, and even then they never harbor any hatred towards his kind. The only time that they actually got a bit hostile with Zack is when they found out that all of the trees in FernGully were getting cut down and that Zack was partially responsible for it. Well, fair enough. Zack did lie to them about what was really going on with the trees, and what would you do if someone lied to you about something that was really important? The only character who actually hated Zack because he was a human being was Rabbitearsblog himself, which is a bit justified due to the fact that he was experimented on by the humans, which traumatized him. Thankfully, Batty starts warming up to Zack throughout the film, especially when he starts seeing that Zack is seriously sorry for all the trouble that he had accidentally caused for FernGully. Probably one of my favorite aspects of this film were the characters themselves. The movie did a pretty decent job with developing some of the characters, even if some of them could have used more development. Krista was a great protagonist for this film, as she is shown as being very curious about the world around her. Yet when the situation gets dangerous, she is willing to put her life on the line to protect those she cares about. I also like the fact that Krista tries to teach Zack the importance of protecting the environment by trying to get him to understand about how destroying the rainforest can hurt the trees and everyone living in the forest. There was even a scene in the movie where Zack was carving Krista's name in a tree, and Krista worriedly tells Zack that he is hurting the tree. Then she asks him, "Can you feel its pain?" Which of course Zack couldn't. Of course, in real life, trees can't feel pain because they don't have a nervous system and their bark is made of dead cells. So cutting into a tree wouldn't cause them any pain. Thanks TV tropes for this bit of information. But this is a fantasy film, so we're not supposed to think about things like that. Zack was another character who was pretty interesting and probably had the most natural character development out of the entire cast. Zack started off the movie being a bit oblivious to how beautiful the rainforest really is and why it was so important to protect the rainforest. It wasn't until he befriended Krista that he started to see the beauty of the rainforest. His character arc goes even further when he saw what his actions in participating in cutting down the trees has done to FernGully and to the fairies themselves. And he goes out of his way to protect FernGully and the fairies from hexes as much as he could. I like the fact that the movie took his time with Zack trying to understand the importance of protecting the environment instead of making him learn the lesson right away. It felt natural that of course he wasn't going to fully understand the ramifications of his actions at first until he actually saw the consequences up close. This also allowed us to see the many beautiful scenes of the rainforest in all its glory, and we get to see Zack experience this feeling of wonder as he goes through the rainforest in each scene. Another interesting character in this film was the main villain Hexus himself. Even though Hexus only showed up halfway through the film and he didn't have a lot of screen time, he was still a pretty frightening villain. The fact that he is a personification of pollution and destruction itself makes him quite menacing, and I was a bit terrified how determined he was to destroy FernGully, even going as far as tricking the loggers into using the logging machines to destroy FernGully to accomplish his goals. Tim Curry really gave it his all in voicing Hexus. I was always intrigued with how Tim Curry always managed to sound so threatening whenever he was voicing a villain, and Hexus was definitely no exception. Whenever Hexus threatens the fairies in FernGully, he sounded so menacing with his threats, and I can't help but be so chilled by his line deliveries. Also, I know it may seem weird that I'm talking about this, but let's talk about his song Toxic Love and the sexual undertones in it. Hexus seems like he's really into pollution in this song, as he makes several erotic movements throughout the song and seems to view the fumes of oil as something that he can't live without. Well, technically speaking, he literally can't live without pollution since he's literally made out of smoke and he needs pollution to survive. I was also surprised that there is actually an uncut version of the song that is even raunchier than the version that we see in the movie. How the heck did the censors let the song get by in this movie? They must have fallen asleep when this song came on. But probably my most favorite character in this movie was none other than Rabbitearsblog himself. Rabbitearsblog was such an interesting comic relief character in this film, as he's not just seen as someone who's constantly making jokes throughout the movie, but there is some depth to his character as he had a traumatic experience with being experimented on by the humans, and that causes him to hate humans. I like the fact that Batty goes through a character arc himself as he started off hating humans because of what they'd done to him. And when he meets Zack for the first time, he was often insulting towards Zack. But the moment when Zack is temporarily shunned by the fairies because he was indirectly responsible for FernGully nearly getting destroyed, Batty comes to Zack and tries to cheer him up. This shows Batty's growth as a character as he starts to see that not all humans are bad, and he sees that Zack is truly sorry for what he had indirectly caused towards FernGully. Robin Williams, as always, was such a joy to listen to, as he brought so much energy and humor to Batty's character. Whenever Batty is snarky towards Zach or is constantly rambling on about random topics, Robin Williams' voice just makes Batty's lines that much more hilarious to listen to. This just reminds me of why I miss Robin Williams so much. Now that I talked about what I liked about this film, I would like to talk about some of the problems that I have with this film. I had mentioned before that the film's theme about humans versus nature was a bit confusing to me. It seems like the film was trying to say that the near destruction of FernGully was caused by humans who were misguided and a bit thoughtless in their actions. However, the true villain of the film, Hexus, was actually a spiritual being who was a part of the rainforest. So, who was really responsible for the near destruction of FernGully? The human loggers or Hexus? We can see that the human loggers were only doing their jobs and that they thought that it was their boss talking to them about working overtime instead of Hexus himself. Although I do wonder why the human loggers never questioned about whether that was the real boss or not. I mean, wouldn't they have been a bit suspicious about how the boss sounded, or why their boss suddenly asked for overtime out of the blue? That's the problem sometimes with trying to implement fantasy elements into a film that's preaching about protecting the environment. It tends to send mixed messages to the audience, and we're not sure about who is to blame for the environmental disaster that happens in the film. Another problem that I have with this film is that some of the characters weren't developed very well. There were some cases where the film assumes that we know the backstory of a specific character, but it doesn't fully explain why that character is in that point of their lives. Like for example, regarding Krista and Maggie, the film starts off with Maggie teaching Krista about the importance of taking care of the rainforest and on how to improve her magic. But we don't know why Maggie chose Krista to be her pupil, or how long Maggie has been teaching Krista her magic. Did Maggie see some kind of potential in Krista that she didn't see in the other fairies? It would have been nice for the film to explain about the history between Maggie and Krista, and why Krista was chosen to protect the rainforest if something were to happen to Maggie. I guess it's because Krista is the main character of this film, so it would make sense to give her the role of protecting the rainforest. Also, I felt that the relationships between the characters weren't quite that well developed as I would have liked. I could sort of buy Krista and Zach's growing relationship with each other, as they spent most of the film with each other. But I'm not sure about what kind of relationship Krista has with Pips. The film was very vague about whether or not Pips and Krista were romantically involved with each other before Zach came along. I mean, sure, there are many moments in the film where Pip does get jealous of Zach spending time with Krista, but other than that, we don't get much insight on their relationship, other than the fact that they've known each other for a long time. And one more problem that I have with this film, and it's a small nitpick, but I felt that the film was trying too hard to prove how relevant it was to the audience of the 1990s by inserting so many 90s lingos and songs throughout the movie. I didn't have a problem with this the first time that I watched this film, but now that society has changed so much over the years, all these 90s lingos and songs only dated this movie. I can't help but cringe a bit whenever the phrases radical and bodacious are being used. It's like this movie was saying, yeah, this film was basically preaching about protecting the environment, but we want to prove how cool this film is, so we are just going to put in lots of 90s lingo and songs into this movie. Even going as far as having a goanna rapping out a song and having the fairies dance to music from a Walkman for no reason at all. There was a direct-to-video sequel for this movie called FernGully 2, The Magical Rescue. You haven't heard of this sequel before? Don't worry, nobody has. Even I didn't know this movie had a sequel until I was in college, which is saying something. I don't know if I'll review the sequel down the line, that's if I ever find the sequel, but it's something that I might check out if I'm interested enough. FernGully The Last Rainforest was rated G. This was actually a rare case where I thought that the film deserved its G rating. Sure, there were some scary moments involving Hexus, especially when he tried to destroy the rainforest, and when he transformed into a scarier version of himself when he had a skull for a head towards the end of the film, but for the most part, the film was pretty harmless, so this is definitely okay for the whole family to watch. Overall, I give FernGully The Last Rainforest a score of an 8 out of 10. Even though the film has some problems with conveying its themes about humans versus nature, and the characters' relationships with each other weren't that well developed, the film did a great job at tackling environmental issues in a realistic way, except for the part about fairies and evil spirits. It's rare that I've seen an environmental film that doesn't showcase the human characters as inherently evil, but just oblivious to their actions and causing harm to the environment. This is a great movie to use to help children learn more about the importance of protecting the environment. Hope you enjoyed my review of FernGully The Last Rainforest.
Hey you, have you been enjoying the Reviews 2.0 videos? Want to get an added bonus for viewing these videos? Like getting early access to these videos before they are released on YouTube? Or being able to request what movies and TV shows I should review next? Then please feel free to support these videos through my Patreon account. Check out all of the tier titles on my account and choose which tier title you want to be known as. You could become a new member on the block, an early bird, be a part of the future Bunch team, a backstage passenger, an animation superstar, and last but not least, the honorary Supreme. So show off your tier-tired name to the world once you support the Reviews 2.0 videos through Patreon. Hey guys, like this video? Then please feel free to hit that like button. And also, hit that subscribe button for more content about video games, movies, and TV shows from this channel. And now, let's roll the credits, please.